Hello, my name is Robert Haddad, and today I'll be discussing the question, in what year did Jesus Christ die and rise from the dead? This is a very interesting question, especially as we approach the year 2033. Let's go back in time, back to the year 2000. What did we celebrate in that year during the reign of Pope St. John Paul II? We celebrated the Great Jubilee of the birth of Jesus Christ, the great event, otherwise known as the Incarnation, when God became man. To celebrate this great event in AD 2000 presupposes that we must believe that Jesus was born at the beginning of AD 1. But we're not certain exactly as to when Jesus was born, let alone when he died and rose from the dead. We take the chronology of when Jesus was born ordinarily from the Greek monk Dionysius Exiguus. If we believe this year is the year 2023, it is because we are following his calculations. However, he genuinely got it wrong to some extent. According to his calculations, Jesus is born at the beginning of AD 1. But we know as a fact, and recorded in the Gospels, that Jesus is born in the reign of Herod the Great. And most historians believe that Herod the Great died no later than 4 BC. And if Jesus was born during his reign, then he must have been born sometime between 6 and 4 BC. These days, however, there's a growing number of historians who believe that Herod the Great did die some years later, perhaps as late as 1 BC. And to plot Jesus' birth according to that year of death for Herod, one could safely presume that Jesus was probably born around 3 BC. And this is my preferred opinion, 3 BC. If that being the case, if Jesus is born 3 BC, then 33 years later places the climactic events of Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection in the year AD 30, rather than AD 33. But what other corroborating evidence is there for this opinion of mine? Firstly, there are only 2 candidates for when Jesus died, either Friday the 7th of April, AD 30, or Friday the 3rd of April, AD 33. Why only these 2 possible dates? Firstly, the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, place the Passover, the Jewish Passover, normally celebrated in their calendar on the 15th day of Nisan, on a Friday, what we now call Good Friday. John's Gospel, however, has the Passover on a Sabbath or a Saturday, the day after Good Friday. Which of these 2 are, so to speak, correct? John's Gospel. Why? Because during the reign of Pontius Pilate, as the procurator of Judea, between the years AD 26 and AD 36, the Passover never fell on a Friday, but it did on a Saturday or Sabbath on 2 occasions, namely the 8th of April AD 30 and the 4th of April AD 33. Okay, well, what is the evidence in favour of AD 30 over AD 33? The first piece of evidence is supplied by the Gospel of Luke in chapter 3, verse 1. Here, Luke says that John the Baptist began preaching a baptism of repentance in, quote, the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, close quote. Augustus Caesar died on the 19th of August, AD 14. The 15th year after this would be the 12 months after the 19th of August, AD 28. So, If Jesus' ministry began no earlier than 6 months after John's, he would have probably started his ministry sometime around mid-AD 29, culminating in his crucifixion 3 years later or so in April AD 33. But there is another way of calculating the beginning of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. Officially, Tiberius became co-emperor with the aging Augustus in the northern autumn or southern spring in AD 12, sometime between September and November of that year. How do we know this? One piece of evidence is from the Roman historian Suetonius in his book, The Lives of the Caesars, Tiberius, paragraph 21. If we count Luke's 15th year from this time, that is AD 12, John the Baptist begins preaching sometime after late AD 26, and Jesus 6 months later, sometime in AD 27. 3 years after this places us in AD 30. In AD 30, the only possible date for Jesus Christ's crucifixion, death and burial is Friday, the 7th of April. But this is not conclusive, as most historians still date the beginning of Tiberius' reign from the death of Augustus, 19th of August, AD 14. What other evidence is there for preferring AD 30 over AD 33 for Jesus' passion, death, resurrection, etc.? It comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verse 19. Here, Jesus is recorded as saying, quote, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up," close quote. His Jewish audience responded, quote, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" Close quote. This reply is in the present tense, present continuous tense, meaning, quote, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, etc." When did this construction begin? Some say either 20 or 19 BC. In any case, 46 years after these dates is either AD 26 or 27. If the latter, it aligns perfectly with my preferred date for the beginning of Jesus' public ministry and his first visit to Jerusalem, as recorded in John chapter 2. What is the consequence of all this? If Jesus Christ begins his public ministry in AD 27, he is therefore crucified, dies, and is buried in April AD 30. Likewise, his resurrection. The celebration of these events 2,000 years later should therefore occur in 2030 rather than 2033. Should we then expect dramatic things in 2030? Only God knows, and only time will tell. Thank you, and God bless.